people's stories. My name's Bonnie.
And I'm Carol Ann.
And I'm Colette.
Welcome today to our guest, Gord May. Gord is an old friend of ours. In fact, he's like a son because he was good friends with my son, and they grew up together, played football together, and did lots of things together. But in his high school years, Gord moved back to his family's home province of Manitoba. And there, Gord got involved with football again, but also joined the reserves. We just are so honored today to hear Gord's heartfelt, tender story. And we just know that you are going to enjoy his story too.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. Like you said, I was going to talk today about my time in Afghanistan in 2008, which was a combat tour that I did with my reserve unit that I had joined in Winnipeg. But sort of just to give a little background before I do that, might as well start right at the beginning. So like I was saying to you guys earlier, this really isn't something I talk a lot about or even give a lot of my thought process to. So this is kind of, I think, therapeutic for me maybe to go into more details, and actually just preparing for it and sorting out the details really started to create some perspective for me, which I think has been really good. So as you mentioned, I was raised in Sudbury for a lot of my formative years. It was a Christian home. We were going to church every Sunday, Sunday school, youth group once I got to that age. And in my youth, I really went through a phase where I got pretty close to God, was filled with the Holy Spirit, and had a lot of amazing experiences that way. And I think that really formed a good foundation for going into my adult years. But as you said, once we moved back to Winnipeg, a small community just south of Winnipeg, actually. Once I was ready to go to college, I ended up moving out on my own into Winnipeg. And at that point, I sort of got into the world a little bit. I stopped attending church regularly. I always still believed in God. I still had my faith, but at the time I was just a little bit disillusioned, I guess I would say, with the church. Like I felt, like it was well-meaning, but for whatever reason, it just didn't feel like a good fit for me at the time. I didn't find a church that I really enjoyed attending in Winnipeg. And yeah, typical college story, right? Like you start to get into drinking and partying a bit, and just kind of experiencing the world out on my own for the first time. To be honest, I think what sort of pushed me away from the church was just I found that I always felt guilty, like I felt condemned, like I didn't measure up to some sort of lofty Christian standard that I had built up for myself through my childhood and whatever, and just seeing all these strong Christian people like yourselves, to be honest. And I just basically got tired of feeling guilty all the time. And so looking back now, I see clearly I didn't understand grace and God's grace for my life. But so at the time, it kind of took me down a different path. So that was in 2002. Then I joined the military reserves with a unit in Winnipeg called the Fort Garry Horse. They were an armored reconnaissance unit. And at the time, I had a friend who was in the unit, and he was telling me all about it. And pretty much at that point, for me, it was just a part-time job during college, because we would train 1 week a night and then 2 weekends a month. And we would go to, there's a military base about 2 hours west of here. We would go and do field training with them on weekends and stuff. And I didn't know really where it was all going. But 5 years later, in 2007, and Canada was part of a NATO mission in Afghanistan. As part of the International Security Assistance Force there. And at that point, they had been in the country at war for about 6 years. And so their regular force was starting to get depleted a little bit. And so they called on the reserves to supplement the regular force on future ongoing tours. And so, like I said, by 2007, it became time for our unit to supplement the regular force for a tour in 2008. And so because we're reservists, we have the option to go or not. So there was about 15 of us from my unit that chose to go. People ask me, you know, what was behind that decision. And honestly, at that point, I had been training for 5 years for something like this. And I kind of felt like it was my duty almost. It just seemed, you know, if we're not going to step up when we're called on, then what are we training for, right? So at that time, leading up to that, like I just had total peace about the decision. Like I said, like I wasn't walking nearly as closely with God as I should have been, but I still believed in heaven and eternity and things like that, and so it just felt like that was sort of where God was leading me. Like it just seemed like a natural fit for me to go and do this thing. And I had a peace about it. And I wasn't afraid. And to be honest, that verse that from Paul speaking where he's in prison and he just says, you know, for me to live is Christ and for me to die is gain. And that was honestly my thinking. I was like, you know, what's the worst case scenario here? I die and go to heaven. Like, it doesn't sound too terrible to me. And what better cause to give your life for than something like that, I thought. So, yeah, so at the time I had graduated college and I was working for Manitoba Hydro, which is a electrical utility here in Manitoba. And so they gave me a leave of absence. They're a Crown corporation, so they're very supportive of the military. So I got a 17-month leave of absence to go and train full time for 8 months and then go on tour for what they said was going to be a 6-month combat tour. It ended up being basically 9 months in the end. So our job was what's called force protection. And so our duties included convoy escort. So we were stationed at Kandahar Airfield, which is in Kandahar province. It was sort of one of the front lines of the war there at the time. So all the international militaries that were part of the NATO group there were all stationed out of Kandahar Airfield. We call it CAF for short. And all the supplies, so all the food, all the weapons, ammunition, vehicles, everything like that was flowing into the country through Kandahar Airfield, which is where we were. And then from there, it had to be disseminated throughout the province to all of what's called the forward operating bases, which is where the battle groups were operating out of. So they were spread all throughout the province and also right inside Kandahar city, which is sort of the capital of the area. So, of course, the Taliban had realized if they can cut off the supply routes to these forward operating bases, then they'd have a much better chance of success in the war. So what they were doing was ambushing the resupply convoys because it's a lot easier to fight against a force like that than the main battle group itself. And so initially when the war started, they were doing that using the ambush tactics a lot more because the vehicles that the Canadians had weren't nearly as adept at defending that type of attack. But by the time I got there in 2008, the military had invested hugely in these brand new state-of-the-art vehicles called the RG-31, also called the Nyala. They're made in South Africa, and they're just these massive SUVs essentially that are completely armored, essentially like a tank. They had a remote weapon system on roof, so the entire crew was inside behind armor, and they could just operate their weapons in it. And they're actually designed to take mine blasts and everything from underneath. So once the Canadians got a hold of that, sort of the tide started to turn in the convoy protection, and the Taliban quickly realized that it wasn't very fruitful for them to ambush the convoys. And so they started switching their tactics more to just improvised explosive devices, or IEDs. And there's various types of those, but basically they're just using leftover munitions and things from the Russians when they were there occupying Afghanistan, and various black market munitions that they could get their hands on, and they would create these basically anti-tank mines or remotely detonated IEDs. So for us, that was our biggest threat at the time, is we had to leave the security, relative security of Kandahar airfield, which was, like I said, a massive international base, and travel out on these gravel roads, dirt roads, highways, to these resupply points. And along the way, you'd face any number of possible threats from IEDs and things like that. So as part of that, whenever we would come upon something suspicious, then the convoy would have to stop. And so we were in these armored vehicles that were staggered throughout the convoy, protecting the resupply trucks. And when we were stopped, we were kind of sitting ducks. So each vehicle would have a crew of dismounts that would get out and sort of form a perimeter around the convoy to make sure no civilian vehicles or foot traffic or anything like that sort of infiltrated the convoy. So that was, like I said, when you're inside this completely armored vehicle, you feel pretty safe. But as soon as that door cracks open and you take your first step out, your spidey senses start tingling a little bit. You're watching every single foot, every single place you put your foot. You're constantly scanning the horizon and things like that, and just it's kind of a really vulnerable feeling. But that's actually I believe the thumbnail that you're using for this video is that's a picture that was taken during a dismount when the convoy was stopped. And so I was just sort of patrolling my arcs of responsibility within that one flank of the convoy. That was taken by an embedded reporter that we had with us at the time. We were transporting him to one of the forward operating bases, and he was going to spend some time there. So it just worked out that we ended up getting these really high quality images from it. But yeah, so I mean, like Afghanistan itself at the time, it's there's old minefields everywhere from the Russian occupation, like I said, that was there before, like years before NATO was there. So there's unexploded ordnances all over the place. There's old Russian hulls from armored vehicles that have been destroyed in that war sitting everywhere. The country was just sort of like this bizarre combination of different time eras, almost like at certain points you would look out and you'd swear you were in biblical times. Like it was mud huts, mud walls, like camels, people, herding goats, and just completely another era basically. But then they'd pull out a cell phone or something, and it was just like this weird collision of cultures too, where you see all, like I said, most of the weapons they were using were Russian sort of Cold War era type things. And then there was us, like in our state of the art, high technology vehicles and things like that rolling through there. So it was bizarre, to be honest. Like yeah, people ask me, what was it like? And it's kind of like, well, how much time do you have? Like I could spend 2 hours trying to explain it to you, or it was amazing, it was terrible, it was scary, it was boring, it was all of the above. Like there's a saying that war is like 99% boredom interspersed with like 1% of just spine chilling, heart pounding action. And that's pretty much what it was. of course, when people hear that you were in a combat zone, the first thing they want to ask you is, did you shoot anyone? And that question always bothered me, like just straight up, I didn't shoot anyone. So that's just what I tell them is no. But I don't know, I don't know why people say that. Like, unless someone is, your close family member or your best friend, like, don't ask them that question. Nobody wants to answer that if they did. So, and then for guys like myself that didn't, it feels like you lose credibility or something if you haven't participated in that way. So that always bothered me when people would say that. So yeah, like I said, I wasn't in any major combat like that. We did see a lot of disturbing images, honestly, to see adult casualties there never really bothered me. I sort of felt like they were like willing participants. They sort of knew what they were getting into, and it was just sort of the collateral damage of people being in a war zone. But what did bother me, and like something that I carried for years afterwards, was the children. So because it's like they don't have a choice to be there. They're just trying to live their life, and they happen to be in the middle of a combat zone. And it's not like World War II or something, although there was a lot of civilian casualties there, but they sort of had defined front lines and things like that. Whereas in this war, it's like these major world powers are fighting against essentially a guerrilla force, which is everywhere and is interspersed with the population. And so it's kind of like a 360-degree battlefield, and you just never know when things are going to happen. So there's civilians everywhere. And another part of our duty there was they realized that for one unit to do convoy escort for an entire tour was just way too hard on the psyche. So what they would do is they would intersperse, they would get sort of 2 units, and you would take turns. And so you'd kind of do like 6 weeks of convoy escort, and then they would give you 6 weeks inside Kandahar airfield on just base security and things like that to give you a break. And so that was sort of, I think it was on our first 6-week rotation on base security. Like, there was a bunch of civilian contractors and things that would come to the base each day, and they were laborers and cooks and things like that. And so we would have to search them and everything on their way in, and they would have to provide ID that NATO had given to them to make sure that they were supposed to be there, etc. But there was 1 day a week every week where if there was any collateral damage caused by the NATO forces to the civilians, they could come to Kandahar airfield and present their case for whatever their collateral damage was, and then they would get cash settlements or things like that to sort of appease the population. And I remember this one day, this grandfather came in, and he had this little boy, I assume it was his grandson, with him. He's maybe 4 years old, and half of his face was just completely swollen, and his eye was swollen shut. And it's this 4-year-old boy, and you could just see him, like, he's going through these military lines, and there's soldiers there with automatic weapons, and we're patting him down and stuff, and he's just looking around, like his eyes are just darting around, like he's terrified. And you could tell he just didn't understand, like this was the reality he was born into, and he just didn't understand why. And like I said, like seeing the adult casualties, like I mean, I saw guys with missing arms and stuff. It didn't bother me, but seeing that kid really bothered me. anyways, I didn't react at the time. Of course, your instinct is you just want to scoop them up and give them a hug or whatever. But later that evening, when I was off duty, they had these trailers with video conferencing where you could go and you could call home and talk to your family and stuff. And anyways, I called home and I was talking to my parents and just started talking about it, and I just broke down. Like, I completely lost it. And at that point, like I said, that was pretty early on in my tour, and I realized that, you know, if I was going to get through this, I was going to have to sort of detach my emotions from the situation, just, you know, as a survival mechanism, basically. So I guess sort of consciously started putting up these walls to toughen myself up, I guess. And yeah, so I sort of did that. I got through the rest of the tour without breaking down anymore or crying or anything. And towards the end of the tour, I could just sense this growing sense of frustration sort of within me. You start to realize, you know, like you're trying to defeat this enemy that you basically can't find. Like, it's just guerrilla tactics versus a conventional military. It's tough, right? Because all you want to do is confront the enemy head on, but they're everywhere and you can't find them. And also, like, just the enormity of the task, you know, like when you go there, I think for every soldier, it's like you sign up and you go there because you think you're gonna make a difference, and, you know, you're gonna end this war and you're gonna be victorious, and you know, it's gonna be great and history's gonna view you as heroes and whatever. But then the reality is you get there and you just realize how almost hopeless the task is, and it just starts to weigh on you as you almost feel like you're just wasting your time almost. And the guys are dying, you know, like Canadians are dying, and then you start to feel like, well, what's the point here? Like, is this actually going to make any difference in the course of history? And so yeah, just a lot of frustration was building up within me, and I know the other guys too, because like I said, like you want to feel like you did something, like you accomplished something. So anyways, all that to say, by the end of my tour, I should mention my parents and the parent group from our unit here, they organized prayer partners for each member of my unit that was there. And so they had designated people assigned to each soldier that was there for my unit, and they sent us care packages and things. And I know, like, that really helped the morale of our guys. And I think ultimately that prayer covering is what protected us. Like I said, that tour is actually one of the highest casualties for Canadians of the entire war, if not the highest. And by the end of it, after all the convoys, we had like daily convoys for 9 months, like I said, we only ever had one IED strike, and it wasn't even on a convoy I was on. It was our platoon that I said was trading off with us every 6 weeks. And you know, like we had a little bit of just harassing sniper fire, like on the convoys, you know, like a bullet would hit. They had like 3-inch thick bulletproof glass on the vehicles. A bullet would hit it and crack it, but you're never really at any danger from that. We had a couple near misses. Like there was one point where our convoy rolled up on an IED that had just been detonated actually by a farmer in a tractor. And so we got there, and it's just the smoke is still hanging in the air. There's pieces of this tractor everywhere. Like you can smell the explosion still. And I mean, that IED was meant for our convoy, but unfortunately it got somebody else, or fortunately, I guess. But in another situation, we had interpreters that would ride along with us in the convoys in case we had to interact with the civilians. And we had this radio technology where it would be scanning the different radio frequencies to try and pick up on any communications that the Taliban was having around us related to the convoy, and the interpreter would monitor it and translate for us what was being said. And at one point we went over this bridge, and he was hearing radio chatter that was saying, "It didn't go off, it didn't go off." And so again, like, there was an IED on that bridge that was meant for our convoy. But, you know, I believe that God and that prayer covering that we had frustrated the plans of the enemy. So yeah, I mean, that really encouraged my faith, that protection that we had. Like I said, basically I got home, I got back to normal life. Like I felt, you know, like I saw guys that struggled with PTSD and stuff after that. And I felt like I was totally unscathed by the whole thing, basically. I guess I didn't realize at that time sort of the effect that building that that wall of to suppress my emotions and keep them out and sort of detach me and numb me to everything. I didn't realize that actually was gonna stay with me, you know, for years later. And so yeah.
Gord, what do you think was your biggest obstacle that you faced in your tour of duty?
Yeah, I think the biggest obstacle for sure was just the emotional toll. I guess I didn't really anticipate that. Like I didn't anticipate being surrounded by civilians to the degree that we were. Like I said, we would go right through Kandahar city, which is like the biggest bustling city in the whole area. And yeah, just the obstacle of dealing with that emotionally, like seeing the sort of toll that it was taking just on the everyday people. Like I said, when I got back, I had that growing sense of frustration at just the impossibility almost of the task to really rout out the Taliban and set up this country for success in the future. And I guess I was frustrated with God a little bit too, just because, like I said, just seeing just the worst side of humanity, basically. Like I just didn't understand how God could let people like do that to each other, you know. And so, I mean, I never doubted his sovereignty or anything, but I just didn't understand, and it was just frustrating to not understand. So continued just down that path. It's just one thing about the military culture is it's there's a lot of drinking. I mean, it's an amazing brotherhood, and it's really great that way, but it's there's still sort of that idea that, you know, military guys, you're tough, you don't show emotion, you don't talk about emotions. So I mean, there was none of that between us with each other. Nobody wanted to look like the weak one in the group or whatever. And so yeah, just got back into a lifestyle of a lot of drinking, a lot of partying, not attending church, like I said, still. And that went on for about 4 years. And then by 2012, I had just gotten married the year before, and we moved away from the Winnipeg area. I had applied for a job within my company out at this town called Lac du Bonny that was about 2 miles or 2 hours, sorry, east of Winnipeg. And we got out there. It was a big construction project on a hydro dam. And, you know, I was working a ton of hours, making the best money I had made ever in my career. We bought basically my dream house, beautiful house right on the water out there. And it's all Canadian Shield. I mean, it's just a gorgeous area. You know, I had all these toys that I had ever wanted, like bought a quad and bought a boat and a snow machine, and was just totally living the life that I thought was my dream life. We ended up having both of our daughters while we were out there. So I had 2 beautiful girls, you know, a beautiful wife. And I just found that I was unhappy. Like I just couldn't enjoy it. Like I felt like my emotions were still tempered. Like I couldn't experience joy almost. And that lasted for 3 years out there, that project. And then the time came that project was wrapping up. And so I was transferring back to my old job back in Winnipeg. And so we had to sell our house out there and buy a new house back near Winnipeg. And so that was the summer of 2015. And immediately we got a good offer for our house and accepted it. And so we put an offer on a house near Winnipeg, and everything looked like it was just going to work out perfectly. And a few months later, once we had already moved actually to our new house by Winnipeg, the sale of our house back in Lac du Bonny fell through. Their financing fell through. And so that sort of started this ball rolling of these, like just a series of unfortunate events, you might call it, or something. The one good thing is when we moved back to Winnipeg, we moved to a town called Niverville, where I had lived briefly with my parents when we first moved back to Winnipeg before I attended college and that. And me and my wife and family started attending church again. And that was, looking back now, like that was a major turning point in my life. Just a really great church out here. But like I said, so now here we are living in our new house, but we still own our second house. So the months are rolling by and our second house is not selling, and just having to pay 2 mortgages. We had a major repair bill that ended up coming through on one of our vehicles, it was like $2,500 or something. And then we had sewer problems at our new house. A tree fell on our old house in Lac du Bonny while we were gone and destroyed a bunch of the siding and windowsill and stuff. There was a death in our family. And it just felt like all these things were just piling on. And I just started to feel like this stress just binding me and just squeezing tighter and tighter on me. And, as the sole income earner in my family, and with these, like a 2-year-old and an infant, I just felt, like I had to keep it all together and not show emotion again, and not take out the way I was feeling on anyone. And it just felt like everything was just bottling up inside of me. And then finally by late September, we had gone back to the house in Lac du Bonny. We would go every couple of weeks to cut the grass and try and keep it presentable for showings. We went back there this time and went into the house, and we're just making sure everything was good. And we saw in the downstairs bathroom that I guess the faucet had developed a leak, and it had started dripping into the shower. And I guess it had been doing that for a long time because there was a huge brown stain that had developed from the drip. It's lake water out there, and it's very organic. And you know, it was just one more thing. It was like, that was, for whatever reason, that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. And you know, I was just so pissed off that it just seemed like, you know, just one thing after, like nothing could go right almost at the point. So you know, I got some bleach or whatever, and I got down in the shower there, and I was scrubbing the stain off, and I was just mad, and I was kind of talking to God, you know, just like, why is this happening? Like, what are you doing to us here? And I heard very clearly the Holy Spirit said to me, do you remember when you used to humble yourself on your knees like this in front of me? And it was like that just opened up this wellspring in my spirit, and like I just started bawling. You know, I just it was like God was calling me back to him just in this moment. And like I couldn't handle it. I had to go out. I sat on the dock, and as I was sitting there, like the wind picked up on the bulrushes, and it was like I could just feel these waves of love like washing over me. And then it dawned on me that I had set up a rainwater capture system, because we were on a cistern out there, and then we had a holding tank for our wastewater. And there was a valve that I would turn to allow the eaves troughs would like catch water and siphon it into our cistern. And there was a valve I would open to allow that to happen. And then when I wasn't there, I would close the valve because I didn't want it to overflow. And it dawned on me that when I was looking through the house, I realized I had left that valve open while we were gone, and we hadn't been there for like 2 weeks, and we had got a ton of rain. And I had noticed that our cistern was full, but also our wastewater tank was full, and that tank was in the crawl space of our house. And so what had happened is that holding tank would have overflowed with rainwater and flooded our entire crawl space. But because of that dripping faucet, it kept the water level just below the overflow level. And you know, like if I had just gone in there and there was no stain and that tap was dripping, I would have just tightened the tap and not thought about it. But it was like God left that stain there for me, just sort of as a calling card almost, to say like, hey, like I'm here, I'm looking after you, you know, I have your back. And you know, I was just so touched by that. And so yeah, like those are some of the obstacles that I was dealing with after. And I guess you know, like talking about a pivotal turning point, that would have been it for sure. And yeah, after that, I just committed myself to just reconnecting with God and getting back to where I should have been with him.
If you were talking to someone else now who was getting ready to go on tour of duty, it sounded like that you had to numb yourself to survive. But would you recommend that as a way for people to survive what they would see and hear and have to experience every day? Like, what would be your recommendation?
No, I wouldn't recommend it at all. I think it's definitely more detrimental than whatever fallout might come from just being sensitive to the things you're seeing. And I think I think if I had heard somebody tell me that experience and how that strategy didn't work, I think I would have leaned a lot more into sort of a strategy of reliance on God. Like, I think that would have made a huge difference if I, was walking with him and just totally in open relationship with him at the time. I think it would have totally changed everything for me there. Like, I think it would have been amazing. Sort of related to that, actually, like when just continuing on, like after this event happened with the dripping faucet, like it actually still went on for months after that of our place hadn't sold, and just the stress of 2 mortgages and everything that was going on. And so by November 1st, actually, I remember the exact day. Like I said, I had been attending this church in Niverville since the summer, and the finances were so tight, I hadn't been able to tithe or give offerings or anything like that. And I felt like sort of God understood where I was, but by November 1st, I just felt him like convicting me that I should tithe or whatever. And I was like, okay, God, like, what do you expect me to give here? Like, my financial situation and where we're at. And, I want to trust you to provide, but sort of the reality is like not letting me do that. And I heard him say this dollar figure in my mind. Like, I had a check, I'm sitting at church, and this check, and I'm like, what number do I put in here? And I heard him say a dollar figure, and I was like, God, like, if I do that, we will literally have like $12 left in our bank account. And I heard him say it again, and I was just like, all right, like, this is, this is a big step here. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to trust you. So I wrote the check, put it in the offering plate, and after the service, they sort of had like a bit of an altar call or whatever, and I just went to the front and got on my knees, and I was just like, that's it, God, like, I'm completely at the end of myself here. Like, I'm totally relying on you. I just surrender. Like, I give up. And whatever, nothing really happened. We went home, and later that week, we got a call from our realtor, and she told us that she had actually had someone inquiring about our house in Lac du Bonnet on October 31st, which was the day before that, Halloween. It was the day before that Sunday. And she didn't want to tell us that she was showing them the house because she knew sort of how stressed we were and how badly we needed to sell it. And she didn't want to get our hopes up if it wasn't a serious buyer. But they had actually made an offer, and that, we accepted it, and it was sold just like that. It was a done deal, like within the same week, of just that act of obedience and surrender. And so, yeah, I think that would be a major strategy, like we were saying, is just just total surrender and just giving up that self-reliance of being like, if I'm strong enough, if I can contain my emotions enough, then I can accomplish this task. Like, we're never meant to operate that way. And then in the years since then, God has just been walking me through this process of just taking down the bricks of this wall that I had put up around myself and lived with for years. I took some online Bible school classes, and started to learn about just the covenants in the Bible and God's different covenant relationships with mankind through the Bible. And started to develop this understanding of why the Old Testament God looked like he did, and like why there was, punishment for sin and things like that initially, and how that changed. And just through this understanding, it was like one day, just the whole theory of grace just clicked in my mind. Like it was like literally a light bulb going on. And it's like Paul was saying in his letters, like there is no condemnation for those that are in Christ Jesus, and like I'd heard that all my life, but I didn't understand it because I didn't have this wider picture of how the covenant relationship changed, with the new covenant. And that was a major breakthrough for me. I heard this analogy around that time, which was part of me understanding God's grace. And it was super poignant because I had two little girls, right? And so the analogy was that when a parent has a toddler and they're learning to walk, and they'll stand up and they'll take one step and they'll wobble and fall down, that father figure, that parent, is not disappointed that they fell. They're just thrilled that they attempted to walk, and they're just so proud of them for getting up and trying again. And that just totally changed my view of my relationship with God. Like for the first time, I sort of felt like I didn't have to live under that guilt of failures and just shame and regret. And I understood that, he's not disappointed in my failures. He's just thrilled that I get myself back up, come to him again, and just, try to keep walking with him. And so, that could be another strategy, I guess, is just forgiving yourself. Like, I know around that same time too, like there was certain things from my past where they would come up in my mind, and like I would just go to God with them and be like, God, I'm so sorry about this. I'm so sorry. Like, please forgive me. And finally, I heard the Holy Spirit say, like, he already forgave you for that. Like you haven't forgiven yourself for that. So that's where that condemnation is coming from. And so that would be a strategy, I think, is just forgive yourself. Like you can't change those things that happen, but God's forgiven you, so there's no reason for you to hold it against yourself. I think another strategy too, sorry, I have a few here actually, would be trusting him. Just another sort of thing in my journey with him that came up was in 2018 in the winter, I tore my ACL playing in this indoor soccer league that I played in. It's actually the second ACL I had torn. I had torn the ACL in my other knee years before that. And, like I've been getting a bunch of good teaching on healing and just how, this idea, of course, that when Christ died on the cross and, by his stripes we're healed, and that we have authority over things like that. And I sort of became obsessed with the idea that I thought God was going to heal my ACLs. Like I shouldn't need surgery and things like that. And I could feel this frustration growing in me again, because I'm like, like, God, these are your promises. I'm doing what you're saying. I'm reading healing books. I'm like getting prayer for healing and all these things. And I just sort of became, like that song says, like I wanted the healing more than I wanted the healer kind of thing. And there was one day when I was thinking about it, and again, I just heard the Holy Spirit say to me, like, who cares about your knees? And I was like, excuse me? And I heard him say it again. He said, "Who cares about your knees?" And I was like, well, I thought God did. Like, I thought he wanted me to be whole, you know? And he just said he cares about your heart, you know? And at that time, I had gone to this prayer meeting at our church, and I was on crutches at that time because of the torn ACL, and I had a brace on and it was all wrapped up and whatever. And I was sitting there, and of course, at a prayer meeting, if there's a guy on crutches, like, you kind of become this target for people to come pray for you. And so people were praying for me and praying for healing and things, like for my knee. And I just felt like my stomach clench, and like I doubled over and just sort of let out this groan. And I just felt that frustration, like that weight that had been on me, it just felt lifted off. And you know, like, I'm sure these people had no idea what was happening. Like, they were praying for my knee, and here I am being healed of this frustration that had been plaguing me and just sort of seething under the surface for so long. And you know, like, from that, I took away that, you know, if God had healed me of my knees, you know, it would have been amazing. My faith would have been encouraged. It would have been great, but my heart wouldn't have changed, you know. And that's really what he's concerned about. I mean, torn ACLs, like, it's just this temporary thing, right? And these earthly bodies, like, it's really not a big deal at all to him. Not to say that he doesn't, of course, heal us physically, but so yeah, like that would be another strategy for sure, is just trusting him that he knows best for me what I need. You know, like, I needed to stop chasing what I thought I needed and really just trust him that he's gonna give me what I actually need, because he knows me better than I know myself, of course. Kind of along those same lines here, just one last one would be in 2021. So just recently, I guess several years after that last incident I was talking about, I kind of felt like, I thought it was frustration was like kind of creeping back into my life, and I didn't understand why, you know, like, I was praying through it, and I just felt like I couldn't quite break through this, like this growing sense of oppression almost from it. And eventually we were at a church service, and kind of realized that, like, there's something bigger going on here. Like, this is kind of it's something that, like, I just can't seem to make any progress through on my own. And so we have this amazing guy at our church who sort of specializes in deliverance of oppressing spirits. And I got him to pray for me, and I was like, yeah, I feel like there's a spirit of frustration that's just holding me down. And so he started praying for me in regards to that. And nothing happened. Like, there was nothing really going on with that. And then he got this sense, and he started praying against shame, like a spirit of shame. And immediately, same thing, like, my gut clenched, and just something came out of me, and it was intense. Like, it came screaming out of me. And but yeah, it's again, it's the same story, you know. It's like, I think, you know, in my eyes, I need to be delivered from this one thing, and it's actually a total separate thing, like a blind spot that I had and have been living with for a long time. And you know, God's just like, it's not that, it's this. Like, he knows what we need. So I guess the other strategy too would just be getting help, like getting support, like that's what Christians are for, you know what I mean? Like we're here for each other. I realize like I always try to be self-reliant. Like I feel like if I have to ask for help, then it means, you know, that's like a sign of weakness or something, which is, you know, I just want to be able to accomplish this on my own. And it's, you know, it's just not necessary. Like that's why we have brothers and sisters in Christ. And so that, you know, if I was going into say like a combat situation like that again or something, like I think you know, I would definitely partner with somebody, and yeah, just because we'd be that much stronger together. So
Gord, if you had the chance to talk to your younger self, and we don't necessarily always listen either. Thank God, I always say that God usually gives us 70 to 80 years in our lives, because sometimes it takes us that long to listen and learn. But if you could speak to your younger self so that you could communicate, I think this happened in the Back to the Future movies. It was critical to get the information across. So if you could say something to your younger self, what do you think you would say?
For sure, one of the big things that I struggled with a lot of my life was just guilt and shame. And so I think I would say guilt and shame are not strategies that God uses to in your life. So if you're feeling that, you know, that's the enemy, that's not him. And just that, it sounds so simple, but like to actually understand that in your soul, like, you know, if you're feeling that way, that's not him, that's the enemy, and he's trying to separate you from God through that. Another thing, of course, is just you know, like no matter how many steps you take away in the wrong direction from your walk with God, like it's only ever one step to get right back into his arms. Like that's how I felt with that incident with the dripping faucet. Like it was like, you know, I had just been walking further and further away from him, but like the second that I turned around, he was right behind me, like he was just pursuing me, you know. And it's so humbling to think that, you know, like he has a personal relationship with like 7 billion people in the world, and he's just, you know, pursuing all of them, and like he's the creator of the universe, but it's like he wants to save my basement from flooding, you know, like it's just, it's crazy. Sorry, it's so funny, like back in my military days and stuff, it was like I never cried, and my worst fear would be to be in front of a bunch of people and start crying, you know, like that's like the worst imaginable thing. And now it's like God has just softened my heart so much, like I can't even talk about him or whatever without crying. And it's like he knew that was like my pride, my self-reliance, right, was like a stiff upper lip, and so he just like completely swung the pendulum the other way, and now I'm just like a crying mess all the time, just so that that pride can never build itself back up, you know. Yeah, I think I would also say just that no life experiences are ever wasted with God. Like he's always working, he's always going to turn those things around, like even when you don't see it, you know. Like I felt so hopeless about this situation, and like, you know, everything just felt so overwhelming at another time, and it's like he's just constantly working behind the scenes, you know, even if you don't see it. You know, especially recently, of course, just very recently, Afghanistan as a country like fell back into the hands of the Taliban. So when that happens, people are like, well, I guess that was all a waste, all these Canadians and other international forces, they died for nothing. All this money was invested and like it was all a waste. And I just feel like it wasn't a waste. Like that was like a 20-year window there where, women and girls had an opportunity to get educated, and, that like a bunch of people that wouldn't have had a chance to even see what freedom could look like, and all these different things, like who knows how many seeds were sown in that 20-year window, right? So yeah, I feel like God's not going to waste that. Like I think he's going to use it. So we don't see everything in our own earthly eyes all the time, and just I would say to myself, like you're doing what God has put on your heart to do, so just trust that he's gonna bring fruit from that.
Obviously, you've seen the news, and there are likely many men, old and young, facing combat right now in several nations of the world. And your story may reach some of them or their families. So do you have words to say now to either someone facing combat or their families?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I would, it's tough because every situation is different. Everyone's, where they're at in their life experience and things like that. But I don't know. I think I would just say that there's always hope, like in every situation, no matter how hopeless it looks like. And just that God can redeem everything. It's funny when I was thinking about talking about this, and I have never shared in this much detail about it anywhere, like with anyone, and because of just how vulnerable, of course, it makes me. But so I was thinking about it, and like usually when I think about it, that image of that little 4-year-old boy with the messed up face and stuff comes to mind. It's like the most searing image. And when I was thinking about it, I just heard the Holy Spirit say to me, like, you're that little boy. Like, the way that I wanted to, pick him up and hold him and comfort him and protect him, that's how God feels about me. And when he sees the world beating me up like that, and humanity beating each other up like that, like that's his father heart for us, And so it's just like this perfect minute example of how, like, my worst memory, he redeemed it, and now it's like an encouragement to me, So, and I mean, I can't even imagine like the fallout and all of the terrible things that people are gonna have burned into their minds, in this Ukrainian war and everything. But just there's always hope, and God can redeem everything. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being vulnerable.
And we'll start our intro. We'll see if I can get my head back into the game.
And I must admit, Gord, I have a little cheat sheet on the top that says Gord, so I don't call you Gordy.
Gordy.
Yeah. Gordy's in my head too.
That's how we remember you, as Gordy.
Yeah. No, I haven't heard that in a while for sure. Yeah, it's nice that there's no pressure of live streaming or whatever. Right?
Sure.
Oh yeah.
We are not ready for live streaming.
Oh.
Yeah.
But don't forget your Kleenexes. I'm kidding.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, I was doing it throughout the whole.
Oh my
video.
gosh.
No singing. She's gonna grab it. Have I
Like,
told you
Told
lately,
you lately
that I love you?
that's going in the outtakes, you know.